Welcome to My Big Safety Challenge, a podcast all about stories of safety leadership, presented by Dale Carnegie and the Board of Certified Safety Professionals.
One of the great opportunities that we have on this podcast is we get to hear from people from a variety of different industries, some of them not real big, some of them pretty sizable. We have someone like that today.
Absolutely. And we have Wendy with us today, who most recently was working with a tiny company called Walmart, where she was a global VP for environmental health and safety compliance. And, we talk about connections and networking. And I got to recently meet Wendy through another safety and health friend of mine. And now Wendy's a newfound friend of mine. So networks keep expanding. So I think the listeners are really going to have a great experience today as we learn more about Wendy and all of her experiences through EHS. So welcome, Wendy.
Thank you.
So we're glad you're here. So just we're going to get into your safety origin in just a bit, how you really got interested in that. But where'd you grow up at? Just tell us about life in the early years.
Yes. So I am from Canada originally, grew up kind of in between Toronto, Montreal, and Ottawa. So got to spend time at a cottage, got to watch a lot of hockey games on TV, and definitely sort of fell in love with the outdoors and spending time outside.
When did you get this interest in, I was going to say the safety and well-being, but you probably always cared about the well-being, but saw that safety could be a way to spend your life and involve yourself in?
Yeah, I think growing up, I always liked math and science. And so engineering kind of came on my plate early on as a good thing to continue to study. And then spending time outside and loving the outdoors, I picked environmental engineering when I first joined the University of Waterloo's program. And then after graduating with my engineering degree, I did a lot of remediation for the first few years. And so working in that field of environmental remediation, safety is very important, either how you're designing the remediation projects, maybe even what remediation options are available to you, and then while you're executing. So safety was kind of front and center, even though that wasn't the focus of my career. So then it was a pretty obvious transition to move from doing environmental engineering work to doing environmental health and safety compliance work.
So tell us a little bit after you did your schooling, and then what did your early professional career look like and how did that progress?
Yeah, I was lucky that the school I went to was a co-op program. So you went to school for 4 months, worked for 4 months.
Oh, wow.
So you graduate with 2 years of work experience, which for me was huge because not only was I paying my own way through, but I was very focused on getting a job afterwards. So to have 2 years on your resume was quite helpful.
That's great.
It's a really great idea, the schools that do that. Yeah, and so you benefit from that.
I did, and I was hired by a company that I'd done my last 2 work terms for. And I didn't realize at the time, but reflecting back, that made a huge difference because I was put right away on a pretty big project that a new graduate that they didn't know probably wouldn't have been placed on. And that I'm a big proponent of heat experiences through one's career. So that was kind of my first heat experience was right when I graduated.
Help describe for our listeners
when
you're thinking heat experience.
Yeah, to me, it's kind of a high stakes sink or swim outside of your comfort zone, kind of thrown in and you have to figure it out. And definitely, I already mentioned high stakes, but that like a pretty big project that if you can figure it out, it's going to be really good for your career. And if you can't figure it out, then you have to figure out what's next.
So what could you tell us what this was all about that you got thrown into and on the firing line? And
it was a remediation site that had been going on for a while, a Superfund landfill site up way in northern Vermont. And the company I was working for had lost the bid to do the work, but the work wasn't going well. So we were hired as an independent quality assurance team. So I was placed on site, again, new graduate, pretty green engineer, not a lot of experience under my belt, but the company I'd worked for before, so they trusted me and put me on site. Usually I was the only female on site, so that comes with a lot of problems.
Mm-hmm.
If you had to guess, approximately how many people were you interacting with at that site?
There was probably 50, so decent sized workforce, and we were behind schedule, so there's quite a few different aspects of the project going on at the same time.
And so in your mind, did you realize this was a big deal?
I did. I don't think I realized that I was only in that position because I'd had the benefit of the work term positions at the time. But I knew it was a big deal, at least with my future with that particular company. I didn't realize that the client for that project was going to turn into a very big mentor and actually sponsor for me for the rest of my career, still to this day, this is 25 years ago I'm talking about. So it turned into a very incredible opportunity for me.
And, that's an interesting point as I listened to her talk about, at the time she didn't realize maybe how influential that relationship was. And to me, I made a mental note on how important every single interaction we have with every person, with every company, with every entity, positive or negative, because you really don't know what you're going to learn or what it's going to, how it's going to impact you in the future.
You don't even know for sure who's watching you.
That's right.
And whose attention do you get to say, oh, this person could do more, or, oh, don't get that guy or gal kind of thing. So what was it like when you're getting into it? Or what were you finding as you're getting things rolling?
Yeah, and actually to your previous point, some advice that I've given my team over the years is to really watch. Ideally, don't burn any bridges, but really watch if you need to burn a bridge. Because that site that I'm talking about, the company that I was overseeing, I ended up working for them about 10 years later. So if I had handled that situation differently, they probably never would have hired me.
Yeah.
So true.
So not only the relationship on the client side turning into a mentor and a sponsor, but the relationship, the company I was overseeing and kind of very closely watching their work on behalf of my client, I ended up getting hired by.
Wow. Wow. So was it easy rolling along? Was it easy start or?
It was challenging. I had a good partner on site to get me set up. I had an excellent client that I was able to win over pretty early on and then had his support going through. And then it taught me to make sure that I was confident in my position, that I'd done my homework, I knew my facts, and that I could stick to, make sure that I brought up the right issues in the first place and then stick to my position because I had all the details and facts behind them. So
you were fairly young out of school at that point, right? So what do you think, if there are younger listeners out there who struggle with that confidence, any thoughts on what contributed to you being assured of your level of confidence and your capabilities?
Yeah, I think for me, there was 3 things. I was detail-oriented, so I made sure I had my story correct and I'd kind of done the analysis and that I could stick with the position and hold up to any criticism because they'd immediately try to discredit what I was saying. So I needed to make sure that I had the details correct in the first place. Mm-hmm. I had a good relationship with the client, so I knew that the positions that I would raise were ones that were important to the client and that he would have my back. And then I also was able to make some good relationships with other people on site. So I had a safe space to go ask questions to kind of talk through something first before bringing it up in a larger kind of scenario. So those relationships, the mentors, the communication style, all of that was very important to get started with.
Yeah. You triggered a thought of mine that I often will talk to interns or younger safety professionals about. I forget which part you said, but one of the things I like to share with them is whatever you do, don't make stuff up, especially in the environmental health and safety world. It's okay to not know. Say, I'm not positive on that. Let me go double check and research and get back to you and then follow up. But the worst thing you can do is answer or make something up when you're not sure. It could end up impacting the environment or someone's life.
Well, think what you did there, Wendy. You're detail-oriented and you were prepared.
Yes.
And so you had the answers. Now, let's just talk about that for everybody here a moment. what you have to do to be that way. I mean, maybe you're naturally that way, but to be prepared, what you have to do.
Yeah, I think that's where the engineer in me comes out for sure. But Shelley, to your point, like the credibility, it's very quickly, you can lose your credibility if you're not sure and you don't admit that you're not sure. So I completely agree with that. But yeah, just following the process, asking the questions that I needed to ask, and then not backing down when I knew that I had the point that I needed to make.
Stand on. So we hear a lot of people talk about a phrase you used, and that is you built relationships. And it's something easy to say, but some people say, well, what do you mean by that? Could you give us some examples of how would somebody develop relationships with people? What would that look like?
Yeah, I think this was a unique situation because we were in the middle of nowhere on a landfill site. So it was a kind of a closed, consistent group. So kind of being very honest and transparent. Like I wasn't trying to pretend, going back to what we said before, I wasn't trying to pretend I had more experience than I did. And I wasn't shy to ask questions to people that I hoped I could trust to give me the right answers, and then ask others if I was concerned that I'd picked the wrong people. But just really being transparent and empathetic and open to learn, willing to ask questions.
And just from your experience with that, and to help others here, what is that when people are that way, when you were transparent and open and willing to learn? What does that say to the other people, and what is the benefit that comes back to you?
Yeah, I think they could tell that I was authentically being myself, and that hopefully I was building that trust, which is a good basis for a relationship going forward.
Absolutely. So what did the next step in your path look like?
Yeah, so that was definitely my first heat experience. I moved into environmental health and safety compliance after being in consulting for a few years. I originally worked at a specialty chemical manufacturing company and then moved on to a furniture manufacturing company. After that, I briefly went back to consulting, which is the reference of being hired by the company that I was overseeing in that first role. And that change was due to kind of changing personal circumstances and changing business circumstances for the furniture manufacturing company that I was working for. But from that consulting role, I then entered retail. So I got hired by CVS Pharmacy at the time, and I was their first environmental compliance person.
And that was probably a pretty big step, I'm assuming, right? From maybe number of employees to level of responsibility. Maybe talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, so my role before that had really been either a single manufacturing plant or a region of manufacturing plants. So we're talking about maybe a few hundred employees, maybe 5 or so sites, not limited, but pretty obvious regulatory requirements that had to be complied with. You had to go pretty deep in those regulatory requirements, but it was sort of obvious what applied to a sawmill or a furniture manufacturer. CVS was hundreds of thousands of employees with thousands of locations.
How big an area did you have?
Everything, which is the U.S.
So what did you do first? I mean, that's a pretty big change.
Yeah, it's back then especially, it was not quite so obvious where the regulatory requirements overlapped with retail and consumer products. So a lot of consumer products that people use every day, and even some that we ingest, are regulated on the environmental side. So it was really diving in to understand where EPA regulations overlapped with consumer products. And this was a portion of my career that I was very focused on the environmental compliance side of things. So.
But I think probably similarity over to the safety side, if the focus of an employee moving into any new employer, whether big or small, that could be an area to start in addition to trying to build those relationships.
Yeah, for sure. Scale is important. whether it's an environmental program or a health and safety program, turnover in the retail industry is very high. So thinking about designing programs that can withstand such a high rate of turnover that just comes naturally. And retail isn't like, it's not natural to think about exposures or have it be a high risk industry, even
That's
though
true.
there's a lot of extra things to think about when you're in retail. So,
All right. But so far, we've just heard roses and rainbows. I mean, you're not criticizing, condemning, or complaining. You're not doing that, mumble and grumble. Was it always so easy, that first job and then into chemical and furniture? Would you hit any bumps?
a lot of times there was a lot to do in a very short period of time. So thinking about how do you get other people involved? How do you prioritize? A lot of my career has been thinking about taking a risk-based approach and having to prioritize what needs to be done and then convincing others of that prioritization. So I don't think anyone's going to have a role where they can do everything they think needs to be done in the timeline that they wish they could do it in. So
I doubt it.
no.
So help us understand some. How'd you learn to influence? Now you can't do it all on your own. You got to get others. What's some things that you found helped you influence these folks?
I think I mentioned the heat experiences before, and I think I've had several during my career, and I've always seen those as an opportunity to get involved, build those relationships, learn about the business, and have people get to know me and see me and understand how I work before the big ask of whether it's money or resources or capital or whatever it is that I'm asking for. So
how critical is that? Because I hear people oftentimes, they're in smaller situations. They're even going out on a shop floor or working with some drivers, and they like have no contact with them. The people really don't know them. And now they're hitting them and saying, you got to do this, do this, do this. And it's like met with pushback.
yeah.
It's like, who
But
are you?
Who do you think you are
right.
to tell me? And so you guided through some of that. These folks need to know how you do that.
Yeah, and my goal was that the first time somebody heard of either my role or my name, that it wasn't associated with a big ask. I was not always successful with that because things would happen and I wasn't about to delay the ask or delay the project. But
Sure.
ideally, I'd had a chance to work with people before or interact with people in a situation that wasn't associated with a big request.
So it sounds like you had to take some initiative to make connections and contacts with people.
I did. I will also say that I was lucky. Does not sound like the right word right now, but the timing of various heat experiences that I did have sort of made that happen, whether I was taking the initiative or not, to be very transparent. So.
Well, sometimes, as they say, it's better to be lucky than good, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, I've had a lot
Some
of
ways
luck.
there was a fire lit maybe underneath and a sense of urgency.
So I'm just curious, are you naturally that way that you very easily can go out, connect with people, have the initiative, meet, talk, like, is that become very natural for you?
Not really. I am not the type, and the roles I've had over the last few years haven't put me in that situation either, but I'm not the type that can easily walk up to somebody without a good excuse in my mind. So I would call myself more introverted than extroverted. But if I have a good reason, if I need to get something done, if there's a global pandemic hitting a Fortune 1 company. So with such scenarios like that and situations that are a little bit more manufactured, then that's kind of the space that I do well in.
So when you can find a reason and you
Yes.
know this is why.
Yes.
Huge difference.
Yeah, and I know that about myself. So advice I would give people is like, know where you're comfortable, know where you'll do your best. And if you're not the person that can walk up and have an hour-long conversation with anybody the first time you meet them, then putting yourself in those scenarios and looking for those types of projects that just help give you the reason and give you the push to build those relationships is helpful. And that's definitely my sweet spot. So.
And I think probably as other leaders, we can be looking to other younger professionals and maybe help give that type of advice or help them find those situations to work on developing that or to make that a little bit easier.
One of the great things about this podcast through the different seasons, if we have had several female safety professionals, safety leaders that come on here with us. And at times, they've been able to help folks by addressing some of the situations they've had to face and some of the pushback they had to face because of being a female. Would you talk to us about that?
Yeah, so engineering, the school I went to at the time I went was about 10% female. My class had 4. There was 4 of us. I think the school did a good job of helping us kind of get confident before we entered the workforce. There's been many, many times that I've been the only female on a project or the only female in the room. I've been lucky to have some good mentors along the way. It's tough. It's a tough space, and I think it's getting better all the time. So hopefully this advice isn't needed as much as it used to be back 25 years ago. But I do think that like finding a way to be heard, finding good partners and people to have your back. And if they're not listening to you, trying to get the message out through others. And now at this stage in my career, I find I'm very conscious of looking for whether there's other people in a room that aren't being heard and using the tricks of either repeating like, oh, I think I just heard Shelley say X, or calling on people that I know have something to say but are a little too quiet to say it. So kind of going through those pain points myself, but then and having others that helped me, and now really trying to make sure that I'm helping others.
What did you feel like at CVS was just one or two things that you were just really pleased of? Maybe a new initiative you had or something you did that you were pleased?
Yeah, I was there about 5.5 years, and going from the first environmental employee to leaving an amazing team who I actually got to see a couple months ago, those that are still there.
First environmental employee, was that you?
Yes, I was first.
So you blazed a trail.
I did. And by the time I left, they had an amazing team in place, and some of them are still there and doing very well. So I think that was extremely exciting to see. I got to take credit for some very smart hires that I made quite a while ago now.
Good.
And then, so people first, they have a great team, and seeing the beginnings of that team and seeing it grow. And then we did get some good programs in place while I was there. So people, and then successful programs that have withstood. As I mentioned, retail is about scale and turnover, and a lot of what we put in place back then is still working now. So that's good to see as well.
Could you give us an example of one? We don't want anything that would violate, trust, confidence, but what's one in particular?
The intersection of consumer products, and especially kind of pharmaceutical consumer products and hazardous waste regulations, is back then was not well understood. And we've successfully changed some of the regulations at a federal level as well that make it a little bit more reasonable. So just seeing the challenge of trying to train employees to do something different at work than how they handle the very same products at home, and then working with the agencies to kind of, because the regulations were not developed with consumer products in mind. They're not thinking about baby shampoo or nicotine gum to try to quit smoking or things like that when they're developing these regulations in the first place. So seeing those programs put in place, helping our employees think about work differently than home, and then seeing some regulatory change to get things to a little more reasonable spot.
How'd you do that? I mean, because you're talking about a lot of people.
Yes. And that's actually how I ended up at Walmart, which was even a bigger scale with more people and outside of the US as well. But really trying to integrate the process into the business process is how we've found programs to work. So if it's a standalone safety or compliance program and it's an add-on and people have to stop what they're doing to go specifically do safety, we've had a lot less success in that kind of environment than if if we could integrate what needed to be done to either comply with the requirements or keep people safe in the process right into the business process. So the documentation's right there, the training's right there, the process is right there. We had a lot more success when it was integrated as well as it could be into what they just needed to do to get their job done.
So how did you do that? So I'm sure you didn't just create it and go and say, put this into the business.
Poof.
So who did you have to talk to? Who did you have to get on board in order for that to be successful of integrating that into the business?
Yeah, these are both very big companies, so it was a very long list of people. But getting the right stakeholders together for whatever it is that you need to do and having the relationships with the right set of stakeholders, I think is really important. And I will say each time I started or my team started, I'm saying I a lot, but this was very much a team effort for sure. We would always miss stakeholders. So my advice would be think about it as a team project. Think about who you think needs to be, and then figure out who you're missing as soon as you can and get them integrated into the process as well.
I'm glad it's not just me. I feel like with large projects, there's always someone that gets missed, and I feel horrible about it, but it's never intentional. But you're right, doing your best to try to identify anyone that could have a touch point into that project or program.
Yeah, we would always miss somebody. Again, Walmart's a very big company, but we would always miss somebody. So it had to be an important part of the process to try to make sure we had the right people at the table.
Some people would say, oh, how in the world could I get in touch with Walmart? How could I get on that short list to be chosen for that kind of role? How'd you get?
So I talked about the regulatory reform work that I did at CVS, and that's actually how I met my peers at Walmart, because we were two very large companies whose programs were in the right place that we were comfortable approaching the agency to talk about change. And so I ended up being recruited from CVS to go to Walmart based on all the regulatory reform work.
What was going through your mind?
It was a surprise at the time, because I loved my team. I loved the role. CVS is based in New England, and I really enjoyed living in New England. Being from Canada originally, New England it feels closer to Canada than Arkansas does, for sure, and it physically is closer to Canada. I will say, going back to the lucky comment, I do think that, and my advice is always, like, you need to do a good job in your current role. You need to be thinking about what comes next. But a lot of if you're situating yourself well, some of that is still luck and timing to have the right things open up at the right time in the right place that you can take it. So I have tried hard in each of the roles that I've had, but I've also been very fortunate to have great opportunities come up at a time that I was able to take them.
So when you got there and a mammoth of a company,
no doubt,
where do you start?
Luckily there, they had a very well-established program that had been around for probably almost 10 years at the time that I joined the company, and I was there for almost 10 years as well. So I had the benefit of coming into an organization with a great leader, with a really strong reputation, good integration in with their business partners at the time, and just kind of got to kind of pick up and carry on the work. And then a large part of what I did when I had a chance to lead the team a few years later, that is a company that moves extremely fast. So it is a huge company, but it's like a Fortune 1 startup, which is incredible, and it makes it exciting, and it's just such a unique place to work. So a lot of what we would end up doing is just trying to keep up to what the company wanted to do and try to help them do it in the safest, most compliant way that we could enable the business, but keeping the compliance and safety in mind.
So we were having a conversation about this, but you can share with the listeners about how many employees were there?
Worldwide is 2.1 million.
Yeah. So
in the U.S. is 1.6 million, I think, 1.5, 1.6.
So 2+ million worldwide you were supporting.
Yes.
And, we were having a conversation about, risk and probability, and maybe talk a little bit about that. Because I know when you shared that with me, that really took me back in thinking about it at that magnitude when we hear about, 1 in a million chance or what have you.
Yeah, so with that many employees, what became obvious quickly is any communication, any training, any SOPs we developed, you really had to think about all the different ways that things could be interpreted or all the different things that could possibly happen. Because as Shelley mentioned, the 1 in a million, that happens pretty much twice a day, I would say, at Walmart, just due to scale and size. So if you think about, well, that's never going to happen.
It's a 1 in a million chance.
Yeah.
Well, at Walmart, that would be twice a day.
Yeah, so it probably will happen. Or if only 1 in a million people would interpret what I just wrote this certain way, well, then people are going to be reading it all the time and interpreting it that way. So it really challenges your ability to think about risk, think about the robustness of the programs you need, and then think about how it's being communicated.
So I'm thinking now, again, of people who are listening who say, I've got like 3 people on my staff, or myself and one other person, and we've got 100 people here, but what did you learn about clarity of messages that could be applied at any scale? What could help us folks on that?
Yeah, it's always a balance of trying to be as brief and straightforward as possible, but then provide more information to those who needed it. So a very clear, concise, direct, targeted message. And we had the benefit of having large teams within Walmart that would really help us do this and integrate it into how they were receiving communication from other sources as well. But
so did you have some way to check and double check before you sent out to the multitudes? Well, tell us just a little bit about that process so people can understand the value and importance to say, just don't post this thing up on the wall.
Yeah.
Because you got to make sure you minimize the risk.
Right.
Yeah, we had some very strict processes to follow. So somebody on my
team. Are
team, those
ones you had put in, or they were already there?
No, corporate processes.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. So somebody on my team would draft it. I would need to sign off on it. Legal would need to see it. Because again, a lot of communications end up outside of Walmart with the company the size that it is. Then we would elevate it to a actual business communication process. So there would be several review steps in that as well. And that was sometimes it was frustrating that we had to get things out quickly, but a lot of time they would add a lot of value because if they'd interpreted it slightly differently than we did, if we'd used a little bit too much jargon or was a little too far in the weeds coming from our subject matter expertise space, they would help us get the content to the level of who we were trying to communicate to. So.
And I think that's a great point. Again, that whether you're a company of 50, 100, or 2 million, having anyone really give you a peer check or a review or, hey, let me run this past you, see how you would read this and interpret it can go so far of a way.
Yeah.
I want to flip things a little bit to go back and talk a little bit more about mentoring. I know we've had some conversation about this and how important it is to you. And not only to have a mentor, but to also be a mentor at this point in your career, and then maybe the aspect of mentees as well. So I think, you have a unique perspective on the mentee-mentor approach. If you could just, start to talk about that a little bit.
Sure. Yeah. I would be asked quite a bit in my previous role. And I think a lot of folks sort of combine the thought of a mentor and a sponsor. And to me, those are 2 very different roles. A mentor to me, and just briefly, would be like they know something, they're good at something, they can help me with something that I want to get better at. Whereas a sponsor is going to be somebody that speaks up for you or promotes you when you're not there. So sometimes your mentor can turn into a sponsor, but a lot of times that doesn't happen. And I think people try to force or assume that that's going to happen. So my advice to people have been look for a mentor anywhere. If you're farther along in your career and you want to learn more about technology or finance or accounting, then there's probably a new college grad that knows a whole lot more than you do about that topic, but would love to learn from you what it's like to lead a team or learn more about the company that you're working for or things that you have just because of the stage of your career that you're at. So I've found that and some people call it a reverse mentorship. I like to think of it as maybe a mutual mentorship, that if both parties are getting something beneficial from the other party, then hopefully it's more helpful. It may last longer. It's kind of mutually beneficial as opposed to that one-way relationship. So I would really suggest, like, your mentor could be anywhere. As long as they're good at what it is you want to learn, then don't only look up.
Yeah, and any tenure, right? So maybe it's a fresh graduate out of college and you've been out of college for 20 or 30 years. They may have a whole new, different perspective and easier way of explaining what it is you're needing to learn. So I love that approach.
And if you manage a team, likely you have some people that have more experience than you on a team and a lot of people that may have a lot less experience. So I was always worried, like, am I connecting to the kind of newer hires and newer additions to the team, or do they think I'm old and boring? And so, like, getting that insight, whether it's using technology differently, ways of thinking differently, connecting with different team members differently, I just found that, like, I could learn a lot from people in a lot of different spaces, a lot of different directions inside and outside of the company, and not just necessarily looking for somebody that was a level above me.
Well, that idea of that mutual collaborative mentoring is really good, because back in the old days, it was the older taking care of the newer.
That's right.
However, there is such benefit if both will be open to the other, because both can gain.
Yes.
And all. Let's go just a bit different path. When you were looking to hire people, and what were some qualities that you just felt they had to be there to consider, that you look for in people?
Yeah, I think especially at Walmart, we talked about the 1 in a million. So not only does that apply to how things are communicated or interpreted, but it applies to what's going to happen on any particular day. So there was a lot of things that I never could have predicted having to deal with, or having sentences that I heard that I never would have imagined that I would have heard. So being able to kind of adjust to not get flustered. I'm struggling actually to get the words I want, but like if you're the type of person that needed to plan your day and stick to that plan, then my team was not a good team for you to work on.
Some agility?
Yes, being agile, being willing to change, being able to solve problems, being able to think quickly. That part was always important. I think the ability to communicate and build relationships was important, because especially in compliance, you're never going to get anything done by yourself. It's always a team effort. And then usually I was a future round of interviews, so that they'd already passed and was likely somebody's favorite or second favorite candidate. So looking for somebody that wanted to learn. Did they have good questions for me? Was it a good conversation? Were they looking to learn more about the company and what we were looking for, instead of just promoting themselves? So yeah, that agility, that relationship piece, and the desire to learn will really, in our team, that would solve most things that we were looking for.
So, Wendy, as we wind things down, and I'm going to ask you for a final thought to share with people in a moment. You've really had an amazing career, and you're not done yet. That's it. But you've done some wonderful things along the way. But for those people, whether they're 5 folks or they're 2+ million people, what kind of words would you share with them?
I think I'd advise, even in a safety role or a compliance role, to really try to understand the business that you're supporting. Because I think back of, again, I had the pleasure of supporting companies that were doing really well at the time that I was working there. And it's safety at a successful company is so much easier than safety at a company that's struggling. And there's the obvious that if you're not in business, you don't need a safety function, and then budget and headcount approval and capital expense approval, all of those things are pretty obvious. But when we think about our employees in a company, if they're worried about their job, if they're if bonuses are being cut, if they're not sure they're going to get their hours, then they're distracted. They're thinking about other things while they're at work. They may not have the confidence to stand up and actually stop work or pause work when it's really important to do that. So my advice would be to not underestimate how much easier it is to have a safety program at a successful company, and therefore part of your role should be helping your company be successful and not just being the safety function or safety police. So
very much of a broader view than just your slice of the pie for the whole.
Yes.
Well-being of the whole. Well, thank you for giving your experiences and using your experiences to guide and help other people. Thank you so much.
Well, thank you. It was definitely my pleasure to be here.
Good.
Yeah, Wendy, it's been a great time chatting with you, and thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you. It's been very fun.
So, Maura, what a pleasure it was to chat with Wendy today. Ranging from early in her career to working with more than 2 million employees at Walmart, the perspectives that she provided and lessons learned over the course of her career was just delightful to hear. And, one of the things that really stuck with me throughout her conversation was how important mentoring is, both mentoring up and mentoring down, which people might not always think about mentoring up when you're a seasoned professional, and how important that can be, from even my seat to get a mentor who may be freshly out of college to share their insights or what they're really good at.
Because everybody has experiences and perceptions that can be of a help to us. One of the things that really stood out to me was the pressure to be clear and concise in your directives that you're giving, your ideas, because she had a lot on the line when you've got 2.1 million people who could misinterpret something.
That's right.
And that check and double check, and let's see from other people's point of view, the Carnegie principle. Try honestly to see things from other people's point of view, even when you're distributing information, to see if it can be understood, because of the time and the cost that can come if you don't do it right. So great life lessons that Wendy gave us about her career.
No doubt about it.
Thanks for listening to My Big Safety Challenge, a podcast produced in partnership by Dale Carnegie and BCSP, with your hosts Dale Carnegie Master Trainer Merle Heckman and Shelley Baber, EHS Director of Electrical Engineering Services and Systems Division at Eaton. Executive produced by Nathan Wilson. Produced by Joel Burgai. Directed by Giachi Liu. Edited by Jared Griot and Kyla Anderson. Editorial support from Brandon Mohaupt. Social media support from Braylon Morgan and Crystal Keithley. Consulting producers are Colin Brown and Mark Sullivan. To have new episodes delivered directly to you, please subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever fine podcasts are downloaded. If you'd like to share your story of a safety leadership challenge you faced, email us at info@mybigsafetychallenge.com. See you next time.